Good afternoon. Today is April 16th at 1:10 p.m. PST California time, and I'm really excited. Today's golden hour. We've got Nathaniel, who is an amazing and talented photographer, and today we are going to talk about credentials versus connections. How do different generations make decisions? And Nathaniel and I were talking about when we were setting up this presentation around how we should structure it. And what I said was each generation uses different metrics, different decision-making platforms to decide whether or not they want to engage in something, whether or not they want to buy something. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So y'all know me. I'm Lainey Silverman with the Design Boutique. And Nathaniel, why don't you introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what's going on, and then we'll kind of jump into the topic.
Sounds great. Yeah, my name is Nathaniel Filbert. I am a professional commercial advertising photographer, and I've been doing that for 15 years now. So my specialty is visuals, and particularly visuals through imagery, through the photographic imagery. And yeah, we work in the marketing space as well. We do the visual side of what many folks like Lainey do on the branding and SEO side. So yeah.
And where are you located, Nathaniel?
I'm located in Chicago. Yeah.
Nice. I love Chicago. How's the weather right now in Chicago?
Actually, the weather is pretty decent today. We had a beautiful weekend. It was up to 80. So we're doing okay. But yes, normally this time of year is pretty hit or miss.
Okay, and I'll ask you a cliche question. What is your thought on Chicago style pizza? Is it like legit or like
Oh
from the
man,
fake
do I want to
guy?
be on the record for this? I don't know.
Oh,
Uh,
it's a thing.
it's a thing. My personal opinion is I am not a huge Chicago deep dish person, and that's probably very controversial.
Mm.
But I also didn't grow up in Chicago, so I didn't grow up with that experience. So, maybe it's just because of that. But
Okay, because the deep dish is like it's like a pie. It's a whole thing.
yeah.
Like not like here in California where it's like a pizza's like a flat thing. Like you can't even eat it. Well, I could probably, but like a whole piece is like a lot.
Yes. Oh yeah. No, one piece of, like a Giordano's or Gino's East piece of it's like a whole meal. I mean, you can't really do more than a piece. It's super thick and an enormous amount of cheese and sauce. It's pretty intense. So it's not quite my thing. When I think of pizza, it's not what I think of.
Mhm.
But obviously there's lots of people who love it.
What was the place that you mentioned? Am I
There's
gonna?
there's two kind of famous ones in Chicago. There's something called Gino's East, and
Mhm,
then there's a Giordano's. So
mhm.
those are I think the two big kind of ones everybody knows.
Okay, that'd be interesting. I'd love to know about what people think about that.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm sure you'll get some mentions in your comments.
okay,
People,
yeah.
oh, there's this other one, and don't forget this. And
My brother-in-law is from Chicago, so I'll ask him
oh,
too.
I ask him. Yeah, that's good.
Cool. So let's jump into this spreadsheet. How do different generations make different decisions? And our topic today is credentials versus connections, right? And the reason we created this topic today is because um so we were talking about how maybe the silent generation or the boomers say stuff to us like nobody's going to buy stuff from my website. Nobody makes a decision based on how good my website is or how good my photography is or my marketing or brochure. All the decisions are made at the club. All of the decisions are made when I meet people. And our whole business is based on kind of the opposite of that, right, Nathaniel? I mean, we're creating content for people to connect when you're not in the room. And so we wanted to go through whether or not these generations, different generations here, are making decisions versus credentials and connections, and then just talk about the different marketing preferences, decision making, influencing factors, and then specifically in our areas here. So
Yeah.
any comments on that, Nathaniel?
No, this looks great. I'm excited to go through it. I think we'll have
Okay.
lots to talk about as we go.
Okay, yeah. So silent generation, that's 1927 and 1945. So I've been doing a deep dive recently on JFK and watching a lot of
Hmm.
History Channel. I don't know
Hmm.
if you've done that, but it's these years here are very interesting, tried, and
Ah,
my heart goes out to this generation. So yeah, there's a lot going on there.
yep. Hmm.
So, marketing preferences, trustworthy brand loyalty, testimonials, that would make sense, right? the trust factor here based on all of the history. Decision
Yes.
making styles, practical, traditional bound.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think that you're right on these. This generation, I think, very much values tradition. It values practicality. Obviously, the Great Depression follows this, and there's a lot of that shapes a lot of how values were created and thought about, and those things persist. So I think what you're talking about with regards to trustworthiness, brand loyalty, um, testimonials, these things very much are important, I think, to the silent generation.
Right. And it would make sense that they would be, credentials driven, right? As opposed to connections. And maybe we should define what we're calling credentials versus
Yeah.
connection, right?
Yeah,
So,
my thinking on credentials, because obviously all of these things have two parts, but it seems to me that when we talk about credentials, certain generations, I think, value more highly, does the person that I'm hiring to do a service have the proper credentials, the proper education, the proper experience to do the work for me? And they're going to oftentimes hire based on that experience. So, do they know this person has done X, Y, and Z projects in such and such an area? Do we have confidence? Can they show their, various accolades that prove their knowledge, their wisdom? Whereas maybe connection is a little bit more driven by, do I feel some kind of relationship with this person that makes me confident and excited about working with them? And I think oftentimes credentials can drive connection, for like a silent generation versus maybe a different generation might be more interested in connection first, finding their way to the credentials down the road. So how you approach those two things, I think, is kind of what we're talking about, and which one comes first can be important in how you structure your marketing.
I think so. Yeah. Because, like, for example, I guess, what is it? Millennials. You're a millennial. I'm a wait, what am I? I'm a Gen X. I'm a Gen X. You're a millennial. Um, and is it millennials make decisions based on reviews and online? They'd rather look online than ask their parents, right, for information, right? I mean, I know I'm skipping ahead, but it's all kind of that's
Oh,
how my
that's
mind works. So it's the opposite of the silent generation-ish.
Yeah, I mean, again, thinking about credentials, you could say that there's a way of thinking about like asking your parents or looking at reviews as a form of credentials. But I think what I'm thinking about when I hear a millennial generation like my own that looks at reviews before they look at, like all these. So how many businesses have you seen since been in business since 1984 or 1884? That doesn't mean anything to me as a millennial. Like I don't care at all about that. But I think something like the silent generation, the baby boomer, might care a lot more, but that might actually mean something to them. And so when I think about credentials, that to me is maybe an example of that shift, that shifting that's happening. Whereas if I'm a millennial and I'm looking at reviews, or particularly if I'm calling a friend or I'm even a parent and saying, hey, who would you hire to do X, Y, and Z? I'm getting that through referral. I'm building that's a connection thing, that my parents have a connection to that person. I feel confident that if through that connection, this person is going to be the right fit. And I'm not really that interested in whether they went to this school or have this much experience or have done these types of jobs. That's less interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of experience do you get from like a law firm that says we've been in business for 25 years? Like what that's not really telling me about how unique you are, and it's not telling me how good you are. That maybe you know how to pay your taxes and run a business, but that does, I mean, I guess you're implying that you're a good lawyer or whatever.
Yeah, I think the indication is, or the intention at least, is, hey, we've been doing this for 25 years, so we must be doing something right because we're still in business.
Mm,
And I think that to me doesn't hold a lot of weight. And it certainly doesn't get me any closer to hiring you because most law firms have been doing that. And and even if they haven't been, I'm not looking at that as a high level, wow, this really gives me confidence that these folks can do what I need them to do. Um, I think the millennial generations tend to put a higher emphasis on, I'm assuming you have the credentials because you passed the bar exam. I'm more interested in whether or not I want to work with you. And I've discovered that through meeting you, through how your website appears, through whether or not I feel like there's a connection and there's a vibe check kind of thing that happens through a website, through an Instagram, through socials, whatever these channels are. Those are the ways that I'm judging whether or not I want to hire somebody. My dad is not doing that. He's not checking, their website. He's not looking at, I mean, he may look at that stuff, but largely speaking, his filter is slightly different than mine. And I think that's totally fine, but understanding who you're trying to reach, who's your target audience, you should adjust your marketing techniques for that specifically.
I mean, yeah, that's really the crux of this whole conversation is adjusting your marketing techniques to get your clients, to find your clients. I like what you said, Nathaniel, a vibe check,
Mm-hmm.
right? I like that, um, like, so there's that silent generation, with the war and all that, their vibes probably are super jacked up because of all the craziness in the world, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So, so these were techniques. How do I check it? You've been in business for this long. It makes sense that they would be more credentials driven, right? Than connections because of all the crazy stuff happening in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to say, I don't think these are black and white. I think
Yeah.
you're seeing a subtle transition
Yeah.
from the silent generation to Gen Z of moving away from credentials towards connection as a values basis.
Mhm.
And so it's not that later generations don't care at all about credentials, but they care less and less about them using the definition we're using than they do maybe about personal connections. And I think maybe a silent generation that's in reverse order.
Well, you bring up a great point, which is okay. So at this point, if you've got, let's just say you need an employment lawyer or a divorce attorney or whatever, and both of them are saying the same thing. We've been in business for 25 years. What then? How do you make the decision, right? Then maybe you go to the connection, the gut, whatever, you do that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Right. Right. It's exactly. It's not binary. There is a moment. Like I know for sure that the baby boomer generation, my parents' generation, really appreciate connection and they oftentimes want to hire a friend or a friend of a friend. But I
Yeah.
think oftentimes their filter to even getting to that point is slightly different.
Yeah.
They're much more interested in, yeah, but do they have experience? What have they done? Can I see some projects? What are some of their credentials? Whereas I probably will never ask that question, or in very rare circumstances.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, okay, so for decision making style, practical, traditional, influencing factors, loyalty, stability, yeah, classic, realistic. It's so funny too, when if I'm looking at this, visual imagery here, classic, realistic, that makes sense, especially based on now what's happening, with influencers. It's all very raw, right? So like, let's say L'Oreal, they have an infinite budget for marketing, right? They could have a high-end, highly polished commercial, but now they've got some girl in a bathroom, with their dog, whatever in the background, they make it look raw.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
As a photographer, I find particularly when an advertising client comes to me and we're doing a campaign, um, very often the target audience shifts the type of creative we're creating, which would make sense, right? I mean, obviously anybody who knows their target audience is going to want to target them as accurately as possible. But yeah, if we're doing like if I'm photographing a senior living space and we're talking about senior living, the way that we generate that imagery looks radically different than, like, to your point, a L'Oreal commercial where we're targeting young moms in their whatever 30s, or 40s or whatever it is. We create a different style of imagery, and that just makes practical sense. But I think it's interesting and helpful to understand for folks who are, looking to maybe make their marketing more targeted, to make it more effective, to understand the conversation, the concepts behind that, so that when you are hiring and you're saying, hey, I've got a limited budget, but I've got, I want to do an increase in my marketing campaign and I'm looking to spend my money effectively. Well, then understanding where you're going, who you're targeting, and then creating and crafting something that's specific to that, it goes a long way. So I think this is helpful in that
oh,
space.
100. I'm always like redirecting my clients and reminding them, like, oh, by the way, the marketing we're creating is not for you.
Right,
So whether
precisely.
or not you like it, is
Yeah,
is not my main concern. I mean, I want you to like it, but we got to
right.
put ourselves in the mind of the client.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I would say that most people market to their own preference, not to the preference of their client.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think part of your skill set, part of your expertise, and part of mine is to come to our clients and to be able to say, hey, knowing who your target audience is, let us direct you in how to be most effective in what you're creating. Well, I mean, I have so many clients. I have a lot of legal clients who will come to me and they will say, we want like new headshots, or we want new narrative images of our team working in the office, and we want to, and then the imagery that they show me as examples is oftentimes stiff. It looks like it was done in the 80s or 90s. It doesn't, it's all lit and snappy and wild. And I look at that and I say, okay, I understand what you're thinking. This is what you've always seen. But what I'm trying to oftentimes do is, one, understand who are you trying to reach and what's that generation look like? And then two, also understanding that in light of that, what are the modern contemporary expressions of imagery making? We want to bring some updates, right? I don't want to make a headshot on a, canvasy sort of patterned background that looks like it's a school picture, because you are immediately dated and you look immediately out of touch. And I'm trying to help these clients stay connected to reality in 2024, So,
That's interesting. Yeah, the whole like lawyer headshot. Are you in a blue shirt with a blue blazer? Do you have to have a tie? Do you not have to have a tie? Do you need to be in a canvas background?
right.
Maybe we're in front of a, outside on the street, in front of a brick building, like outside, like changing up the vibe, right? That's also, I think it's exciting too to educate the client, because they don't know, right? They're like headshot.
Absolutely. Oh, it's so much fun. That's
That's
actually quite a
yeah.
bit of the fun. Yeah, it's quite a bit of the fun for me, because it's such a joy to see people's, eyes light up when they go, "Oh, we can do that." That's way more interesting, way more beautiful, way more, flattering for all of our team. And, we didn't know that it was okay to do an image that had softer shadows and was, had a sort of an out of focus background or whatever. We thought we had to be on a white background with the suit and tie and sort of harsh lighting. And the reality is you don't have to do that. In fact, I would say all, if not most, or most if not all of my clients, we don't do that anymore. I mean, that's something we're moving away from. So
Yeah. What like now that we're like looking at this thing too, it's like the move towards like authenticity and the like permission to be authentic, right?
yeah,
With
yeah,
our
absolutely.
marketing, which is exciting, which is like showing our truth, showing our, if I think about like the 60s, and like flower power and like that whole coming of age was about expressing yourself. So, and then kind of now we're back to that, it seems like,
Mhm.
which is great, which gives me like makes me feel good about the planet or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
mhm. So, okay, so if we're going to baby boomers, anything you want to say on this before we move on?
No, I mean, I think, at this stage, the silent generation is
Mhm.
probably unlikely to be your clientele.
Mm.
A generation's moving on. And so,
Mhm.
um, but I think it's very helpful to know where we've come from and how we've
Yeah.
gotten where we are. And yeah, I think this
Yeah.
started off good.
So I guess if we looked up some certain stats, we could see, who's making the decisions, who are this, what age are the CEOs now. So that's a really good point. So I think there's, we don't have those stats with us, but baby boomers in terms of if they're,
Yeah.
still CEOs and making decisions as
Mhm.
opposed to playing golf or whatever.
Yeah, totally. And I think you're even starting to see that transition
Mm-hmm.
to the
Mm-hmm.
Gen Xers as they kind of approach their 50s and even
Mm-hmm.
their 60s, in some ways.
Mm-hmm. I always think about the Beach Boys when I hear baby boomers for some reason.
I love it.
I love Beach
Yeah.
Boys. Okay, so their marketing preference is credibility, storytelling, and nostalgia, right? I mean, that makes sense. That's why I think about the Beach Boys and, nostalgia is like looking to the past, right? The good old days,
Mhm.
right? I don't know about that, but
Yeah. Yeah, I would say I think credibility is a super important piece of it. I think storytelling can be I think storytelling kind of falls maybe through the line to almost all gender. I think we all love stories as human beings. We love stories, we connect with stories. But yeah, I think baby boomers are certainly in that, and they appreciate a well-told story. So from a marketing preference standpoint, yeah, absolutely. I think a well-told story can be a very effective way, especially if you include things like credibility, nostalgia, some of these sort of other elements. So
I mean, I would say that you and I are creating stories, right, with our visual images. And so when I hear like credentials, a list of bullet points, it's like when I hear someone say, I'm industry agnostic and we do one, two, three, and four, and I'm like, can't remember what you just said, right? There's no story with that. I'm not creating a visual picture in my mind about who your client is. So if I tell you, I'm working with law firms in Silicon Valley with lawyers between, 5 lawyers to 18 lawyers, and all they do is family law, focusing on high net worth individuals. Kind of boring, but you create the photo, right? You can create the story rather in your head. So I think storytelling is so important with all of these things, all of them.
totally.
That's what marketing is, right?
It is, and that's I mean, very specifically, that's what the visual side is. And I think this is one of those places where it can be easy sometimes to overlook the importance of visuals, not understanding that that's where the story is rooted. We remember pictures much, much easier than we remember, words on a screen. And so if you have a website has a lot of images, those images are reference points, they're mile markers, they're little like bookmarks in your mind that help bring you back to what that page felt like, what it looked like, what the brand was, and maybe even some of that language. And it gives people a way of, it's like, when you're driving, some people are really good at remembering street names, but most of us go, yeah, it's on the corner of what's and what's it with that what's a store, and we think we can see the image in the street corner, and we may not remember exactly the name of the street, but we know that there's that store on the corner and there's a CVS across the street, and we saw somebody walking who had a blue shirt on, and that's the thing that holds us. And I think it's no different for a website. If you're looking to stand out in the sea of companies that do what you do, having a lot of visuals that are remarkable, that stand out, that grab attention, having a lot of that kind of content will really, really help people remember your site, remember the name of it, remember your name, and come back to what you do. Even if it's just to come back to remember exactly what it is that you do or what you value, what you add. Might remember you're a lawyer, but I might not remember all the specifics, like you're saying, Lainey. I might not remember all the bullet points, but I can easily get back to the website because I have a visual in my mind of, oh yeah, I really like that. I really like that website. I'm gonna go back and figure out what it is again that they specialized in and see if that fits my need. I think that's hard to underestimate, especially because it's subconscious. It can be hard to realize that's what's happening, but I really think it's important.
Yeah, well, obviously I agree. But yeah, I mean, not having any visuals, not having any online also makes an impact, right? Because people are making assumptions about you as well. Are they current? Do they know what's going on? It's all saying something whether or not you craft it. So um interesting. High quality. So if I'm looking here, high quality aspirational photos, right? Positive. That's like I'm going back to the Beach Boys on the beach with their surfboard, endless summer. I think about that, that photo. Do you remember that one with the sunset? I love that graphic.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yep. See, there you go. You got a visual.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I'm a visual person though.
That's true.
Somewhat important may use basics. So when we're talking about search engine marketing, social media, you know, I mean, yeah. So if they're starting out with I'm not quite sure if they're starting out using credentials or a connection. What would you put here? And again, we're not going to be tested on this, so I don't even know. It's probably both, right?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I still think that baby boomers probably, whether they are even conscious of it or not, start
Yeah.
with some credentials. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember the other day, my dad was looking at solar and trying to figure out which companies to have come to a bid. And he wasn't looking, I mean, I'm sure he asked some friends if they knew anybody, but ultimately speaking, he was doing Google searches and he was looking and at their credentials. How long have they been doing this? I mean, I remember him telling me how long they've been doing this, how many homes had they done, did they seem legit on their website? And then he would call them and he would ask them and talk to them and build a connection. And maybe the guy would come out and he would see who felt like the type of person he wanted to work with, but the connection followed that credential experience.
Mhm.
Whereas if I were to do that, I probably would ask my buddy who just had his solar panels put on and say, did you like working with them? Were they cool? And if he says, yeah, I'll probably just call them, have them come out and give me a quote. And if I like the quote, we go forward. Now, that
Yeah.
may or may not be smart from the standpoint of, how people think about how you should or shouldn't make businesses or decisions. But I guarantee you, our generation, especially newer, younger generations like myself and the Gen Zers, are doing that. They're making decisions, especially about things that they know nothing about. They don't want to do all the research to try to learn what the thing is in order to be able to vet people. They just want somebody to tell them this person is great. And you want, if you're in a position of owning that business, you want your website to do some of that work for you, in my opinion.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I'm always saying, how do you make your website? How do you make your marketing like pre-sell you? Like they go to your and they're like, yeah, you're it. Like make it so easy for them to be like, Nathaniel's the best photographer. His website just made me feel like stoked. I can
Yeah.
see the quality.
Yeah.
I feel so good investing in it. Like it just is a great decision, right? That's what I think the marketing can do is like take the tire kicker, take the person and just make them feel like awesome about hiring you.
Yes. And most importantly, I don't really feel like doing the work to go look for more people. This person seems fine. They seem great, even, and so why do more research? Why do more searching? If your website already stands out, if they already feel connection, if they already feel like, yeah, we talk about vibe check, these people pass the vibe check. I don't want to sit any longer than I have to on the computer looking up other companies just in case. Let me just call these guys and see what they say. I think a solid website with good SEO, with good marketing, with good imagery, with good flow, with good content can, really, really, really help you be the only person who gets the phone call. And I think that's
Well, I mean, that's I agree 100%. And that's like also you have to pick your target demographic, right? You're not going to be that for everybody. So
right.
you can if you sound like, so general in all of your stuff, which is a big no-no that a lot of people, they're like, they don't want to write kind of personalized stuff. They don't want personalized, they just want to keep it like really general. And then you're not going to convert people, right? You got to figure out who's your target client. What are the words that they're using? How are they making decisions? What do they like? Do they like deep dish pizza? Do they like Napoleonic pizza? Like, flat, figure that out. And I always say, like, if you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable with the marketing, we're probably on the right track because you're saying stuff that
Totally.
maybe someone else isn't saying, and you're also taking a risk in your marketing, right? So,
Yeah, and Lainey, I think you would agree with this, but tell me if you don't. It seems to me that if you're in a business where you can, especially at a stage, maybe a beginning stage or maybe at a revamp stage, where you can say, okay, I'm going to reduce my target audience down to something very small. That can be terrifying, but it can be highly effective. And if that goes really well, you can always expand out and say, okay, now let's add some other dynamics. Let's add some other people. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I think sometimes people are so afraid of losing the breadth of business that they actually end up not making any business because they're too general, they're too generic. Nobody really wants to click them because they're everybody's average instead of being somebody's elite. And I think that relationship can be hard to break through for clients, especially when you're running your own business. And that's part of our job, I think, as people in the marketing and advertising world, to help our clients see, hey, get a little more focused, get a little more niche, create some imagery that's different than your competitors so that you stand out. Because if you're just another, you know, person in the herd, then it's really you're just it's all about luck whether or not they pick your website or somebody else's.
Yeah. What is it? Spray and pray or whatever.
Yes, totally. Spray and praise.
Um, I get so triggered when I hear people say we're industry agnostic. I'm just like,
Yes.
that's like the worst marketing plan. That's not even a marketing plan. That's like, I don't know, even the word agnostic kind of triggers me,
Yeah.
but I'm triggered by a lot.
No,
Um,
I completely agree. Yeah.
okay, so where are we here? Okay, so we're back here. Okay, so let's go to Generation X. So that's me. Um, Skeptical value. Oh, that's interesting. I like this data. Value driven authenticity. Yeah, I'm really into that. The authenticity, value driven. Huh. That sounds like it could be cheap, but maybe it's not. Value driven. Okay, independent, resourceful, self-reliant, work-life balance. That was a big thing when we were evolving after college, work-life balance, but I personally think that's all BS. There's no such thing as work-life balance. Like I believe that when you find your passion and you love what you do, you just do that all the time. So there isn't a work-life balance, right? Because something's gonna suffer. That's what's passion, why passion's so great is because you just want to do it and it feels so good all the time. Photography must have been a passion for you at some
Oh,
point, otherwise you wouldn't have gotten into it, right?
definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and actually going back to value driven, the way I hear that is not so much I'm looking for the cheapest thing necessarily, but more actually I'm looking for the thing that gives me the most value.
Mm.
And that's how that's
Yeah.
how I so it might be in relationship to what I can afford or whatever, but it seems to me that Gen X, yeah, is oftentimes looking for how do I get the most out of the thing that I'm doing.
When we first, okay, so when I started my business, I was just graphic designer. Then I went to web design, and then I changed my business to web design with the development, the copywriters, and then we went to SEOs.
Hmm.
So as time has evolved, so has my business. And so with the value driven aspect of it, we were just providing social SEO, SEM strategy. And the clients were like, okay, well, you just told me we need content, you know, how are we going to do that? And we'd be like, oh, you need to do it. And like that doesn't work, right? So now we do everything. We do
Mm-hmm.
the design, we do the development, we write all the content, we have the SEO specialists. And so that our clients love that, right? Because when I hear like clients say, oh, I got a great deal on a website. And I said, okay, I'd like to see it. And they're like, oh, I bought it a year ago and it's not published yet. And I go, well, why? Well, it didn't come with content. It didn't come with photography. It just came with like the frame or whatever. And I'm like, that's my favorite quote. I got a great website. It was a really good deal, but it's not live.
Which makes it useless. I mean, there's this thing where you say, "Oh, I got a good deal on it." Well, did you? Because you're not actually benefiting from it. So actually, you just spent money and threw it down a hole in some ways.
Yeah.
If it's not actually effective, it's not doing work for you, then you didn't get any kind of deal. So I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, what I so my other favorite, I'm like a quote machine today. The clients say stuff like, "Is the SEO working? Is my social media or search engine marketing working?" And I said, if you don't know, it's not,
Mm,
because the way that you know it's working is that you're actually getting clients from it. And unlike photography, with the work that we're doing, there's a direct analytics that we can get. And so if you
right.
don't know, then you're probably not getting that value from it. Um,
Absolutely.
so the
Yeah, that is one of the challenges that the visual side
yeah,
faces in some ways is it can be difficult to pair direct value to the images you're making. But I think again, based on some of the research we've done and things that we've talked about in the past, I think it's really hard to actually, and when you really look at the psychology behind this stuff, it's
mhm,
hard to not realize that they are very correlated, that you don't have that value without this imagery because of how people make decisions, because of we talk about storytelling. That storytelling happens within the context of a visual space. If you don't have that, you're not telling a story. Businesses that don't tell a story are less likely to do business, and I think that's increasingly so. So
Right.
yeah, I think helping people understand and educating them to realize that these things are paired, that it all comes together, and that can be difficult, but I think it is really present.
I agree 100%. We're meaning making machines of human beings and we're telling stories. So, um, unstage, relatable visuals. Yeah. I mean, these are also interesting. Everything is open to multiple interpretations. So if we're talking about the credentials versus connections, what do you think? I mean,
I think it's the shifting. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think it seems to me to be a pivot
oh,
point. Yeah, I really think that the
mhm.
Gen X, I think they probably maybe value connection a little bit more, but I mean, you could speak, you're of that
Yeah.
generation, maybe you could speak a little bit more, for it.
Yeah, I mean, I really go with my gut a lot, like, because I feel like I'm really like plugged in.
Yep.
So, like, I'm just like, if that guy gives me the willies, or if that girl does, or
Yep.
like I don't, vibe on it. So I will definitely start with the connection. But if it's like,
Mhm.
it also depends on what I'm purchasing, like if it's my car, thousands and thousands of dollars, I'm going to go deeper, if but
Yep.
it's interesting too. I mean, when I'm hiring for my team, I definitely start off with the connection, right? Because I want someone on our team that is like a team player and that wants to be part of the group and like, likes participating with people. So if you can connect with all of us first,
Mhm.
then the credentials come rather, because you could be really good at your job, but if you're mean, then
Yep.
you can't be with us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think again, that's where um, we're trying to tell a story visually of what kind of person you are, what your business
Mhm,
feels like, what it would
mhm,
feel like for your client to work with you and your team.
mhm,
Um, and you want to tell that story well. You want to tell that story in a manner that people are attracted to and feel comfortable with. You almost want to get past that as quickly as possible so that the vibe is there, the connection is there. There's already the feeling of relationship, and maybe that's started on the website and it's finished with the handshake. But you want to move through that so that you can get to how can I meet your needs? Here's my expertise. Here's what I can do for you. Um, but I think if you, especially as we move through these generations, I think you're going to have more and more of you've got to have the connection first before you're ever going to have a chance to say this is what I do well. And most millennials aren't going to give you the opportunity to say why you're the best lawyer or why you're the best finance person or why you're the best whatever if they don't feel like they want to talk to you.
really.
Um, whereas that might be different with like a baby boomer or the silent generation.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, interesting. So, like, millennials, if you don't have that vibe connection from the get-go, they won't even look at your credentials.
Absolutely. I mean, I can just say for myself,
Yeah.
I've been to many, many networking groups and I've met many, many people in the same field, whether it's a lawyer or it's a financial planner or it's a real estate
Right.
agent, whatever, sort of these kind of big industries. And I guarantee you, the ones I remember, the ones where I was like, he was cool. I like talking to him. It doesn't have anything to do with whether or not any of them were better at their job than the
Right.
other. I have no
Right.
idea. My
Right.
guess is that they're all great at their job or have different maybe skill sets or are better in different ways. But ultimately speaking, the person I'm going to call first is the person that I remember because I liked how it felt to talk to them,
Mhm.
or I liked their website. I enjoyed the way it was easy to navigate. I felt like it was very clear what they do.
Mhm.
I judge businesses and whether or not I hire them on their websites all the time. I mean, I've gone to many. You can hire a plumber. If I go to the plumber's website and it is a nightmare, I'm probably not hiring the plumber. And that might sound insane, but I actually think that is how most millennials, unconsciously or consciously even, are moving through the world. And I certainly think Gen Z is doing that. To me, it seems very, very, think about the last restaurant you went to. You're going to look at reviews and you're going to maybe look at their website or Google pictures, right? Now, because how else are you gonna know? Now maybe you call a friend, you say, hey, was it great to eat there? Sure, absolutely. But if you don't know, or if you're in a city you've never been to and you don't know anybody who's eaten at that restaurant, how are you judging that restaurant? Well, I'm judging it from the photos. I'm like, does the food look good? Do the reviews say good things? And so I think those things become really, really important. It's not so much about like whatever else. And so, I mean, you could call that credentials, I guess, but I do think there's like a way in which, to me, there's a vibe thing happening, and so yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So the Google My Business Profile, Google Business Profile, whatever they call it, for people that don't know what it is, I say it's like the yellow pages online. When you Google something, that thing that comes up on the right, that's the Google
Mhm.
Business Profile. Um, it has when your office is open, all that kind of stuff. That needs to be really optimized for every business, right?
Definitely,
Like what you're
definitely.
talking about. But on that part, there's a section they recommend have video of you walking into your office, have a photography of your desk. They have a whole list of things to show the office, right? The
Yeah,
front of the door when you're walking in, your break room, all of that kind of stuff is gives you more credit when you optimize that. And people want to know, they want to project their experience, right? They want to know what
absolutely.
it's like. That's a gallery and that's for a law firm, not a restaurant, right? So,
Or a mortgage broker. If I get to the front
yeah,
door and it's dark and it's like on whatever, maybe the street's a little bit weird. If I, get there and have that experience just arriving, I'm walking in the door with a different a different set of expectations, a different feeling. I might already be negatively predisposed to what I'm about to experience. Now, that could be overridden once I get through the door and I shake some hands, who knows? But it's very possible that you're already working at a deficit. Whereas to your point, if you start and I see on Google, beautiful imagery of the office, even if it's just the inside, because the outside maybe is on a whatever, like a dirtier street, or it's a
yeah,
ton of businesses or something. But I know what I'm getting into when I walk in the door. That's going to help tremendously in bringing me there, I think. Yeah.
100%. How do you create the experience of what you're like, how you be, the type of work that you have without you even being there, right? And the photography, the video walking in, all of that is setting the stage for the buyer, right? So by the time they call you and they say, hey, they're saying, I want to buy your solar. I want to buy your divorce law package. I want to buy all your stuff because they did all their data research online and it was enough.
Yeah,
That's really all of this great work, to
exactly.
do that.
Yeah, you can treat your visuals, your website, your social media marketing, your SEO, all that stuff. You can
Yeah,
treat it as your salesperson. And if you set it up right and you
yeah,
train it right, you build it right, it becomes a very, very effective and quite reasonably priced salesperson for you, and I think helping people and clients understand that that's what this is doing. It isn't just something you have to have because the internet exists and everybody has a website. Like, use it as a tool,
yeah,
allow it to work for you, because
yeah.
that's really, I mean, it's a very reasonably priced, yeah, sales associate, and essentially, again, in my opinion, I think this is what it can do for you. So set up properly, all that sort of thing.
I love because I'm always going back to the ROI.
Mhm.
These are sales tools. They bring in
Yes,
business. It's not like someone's like, I don't want to spend $10,000 on whatever. Well, if your $10,000 brings in $20,000, then why wouldn't you?
why wouldn't you do it?
Let's
Totally.
change the lens of how you're looking at your marketing, right? It's not just an output, it's a return on your investment. And I think people are like, I have to do a website. Well, yeah, you don't want to do a website because the one that you're talking about sucks.
Yeah. Yep.
It
Yep.
doesn't convert.
Yes. Yeah, these aren't, I think a lot of people see this stuff as aesthetics and let's
Yeah,
get into the real business. And I think that's the wrong way to see it. In the same way that, why do so many law firms have, a wonderful, beautiful office downtown in a skyscraper? Because they understand that when the client walks through the door, it feels like they know what they're doing, like it's an elite establishment, like these people can take care of you. And we're just translating that same thing into, the digital space. But ultimately speaking, does the from a financial standpoint, the law firm is investing in that real estate because they understand that it's doing work for them. It's bringing in higher clients. It's bringing in more money. And I think the digital space is exactly the same thing. Think about your website as your office space online, right? Like think about it as what level do you want to project on the digital space because more people are going there than are walking through your doors today. Certainly in the beginning, most people are going to find you and get to know you and even see your face and your vibe through the digital space, through LinkedIn, through your website, through social media, long before they ever shake your hand, if they ever even get to that point. So,
I mean, I'm thinking like offices now are going to be more for like people to go into work, and then like actual new clients coming in, right? So you can get clients all over, right? Why would you want just to stay in one place? And
right.
I mean, it's a pain in the butt to drive into town, find parking, you got to go over some gross stuff on the street, like the way the business is done is changed, right? You don't I would like go in for a consult for divorce law, right? You don't have to go in for a consultation. You can meet on Zoom. You can share all your numbers, you can get to know someone on Zoom. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. Completely
It's
agree.
it's interesting. Yeah, I mean the office is take the what is it, an analogy or metaphor? Take the metaphor of the office, the fancy office, and take that
Mhm.
and put it onto your website.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I
Yeah.
think I think it really is. It's your digital. You think about it in the same way. It's a digital space. It's doing the same work in a digital space that all these other things are doing for you in a physical space, whether it's your office or it's how you dress and how you present yourself. It's whatever the things that you do to sort of shape a persona, a face, the face of the business. You're doing the same thing in a digital space. And yes, you have to do it because that's where the world is today. But it doesn't just have to be a have to. It also can be a really, really effective marketing tool that allows you to reach far larger audience and a far more targeted audience than you could ever do in the days before the internet when you were just putting up billboards and hoping the right person saw it or sending out little mailers and hoping that somebody happened to open it in their mail and they happen to need your service at the time. I mean, we have a far more effective way of reaching people through this digital space. So don't scorn it, really lean into it, I think, and make it work for you.
The, when we used to do print stuff, we
Mm,
used to do mail order mailings and letters and stuff. That stuff was expensive too. And the open rate is like less than 1%, like on a postcard or whatever. So
mm,
I don't know. It's something about the, what is it, intangible, untangible of all of
tangible.
the internet that maybe some people still are tripping on.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think this is just like our credentials to connection sort of
Yeah.
transition. I think you've got it generationally on the digital thing too. And I mean, obviously that makes a lot of sense where, this is a generational technology.
Mhm.
And I think every generation has things that they're used to and become increasingly difficult for
Right.
them to accept and adopt new methods. But again, as a business owner, if you are in these spaces and you're trying to run a successful business, to some degree, you need to adapt. And maybe it's because maybe you do that by hiring a team that's younger that can do that easily and you just trust them because you've hired them. But no matter what it is, I think this stuff is relevant. And I think these are real things to consider. I mean, Gen Z, which we're about to come to, in
Mhm.
some ways, we don't even entirely know you know,
Right.
what it is that they're going to be looking for. It could be connection, it could be something else. They're still young in the experience of being adults and needing services. But as we transition over the next 10, 20, 30 years, we're going to see more and more where all this technology goes and how that generation adapts to it and how we want to reach them, what that looks like. But I still think with Generation Z, um, to the degree that you are targeting them, which might be highly specific businesses, and maybe you're not lawyers are probably not looking at Generation Z as their target audience yet. It's still really helpful to know that this is where stuff is going. It's moving more and more visual, more and more striking, more and more trendy, more and more aesthetics. Some of these engagement, these are things that I think the younger generations are valuing more, and those things become entrenched and get carried through, that when you're 50, like, when I get to 50, I will still want connection over credentials when I'm thinking about hiring whatever it is I need at that point. And so can you begin to tailor as a business your marketing to reaching that type of person? Because yeah, I'm going to eventually, if I'm not already, be your target audience.
Yeah. I mean, like innovating, right? I'm always talking about innovating, just like that example I gave you about my business. I went to design school and then we started doing print, and then I was doing annual reports and then, then we were doing online and then, we went to web and then you have to evolve. Otherwise you're going to become stale and no one's going to want to buy your stuff, right? So it's like, it's
Yep.
not just in the way that you market, it's also in the way that you do your thing, the way that you run your business. Like, are you running your business with an abacus or are you running it with like, QuickBooks software, right? Probably QuickBooks software.
Yeah.
So it's really the evolution in everything here, uh, business in general. Um, so the Gen Z, the last 1995 to 2012, I mean, short form video influence. So most of the influencers, I was on Instagram and they're watching the influencers at Coachella this weekend, right? That's like
Yeah.
the influencer mecca is Coachella, maybe.
Certainly, it's
Um,
certainly it is certainly a place where they congregate.
They go to feed. Yes. So short form video, influencer marketing, social commerce. Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, I don't know how much stuff I buy on from Instagram, or there's that whole thing. TikTok made me do it, like people are buying stuff on TikTok, people are buying stuff on Instagram. I get the social commerce, right? What I love about the social commerce is the review built into the experience,
Yeah.
like the CEO is actually talking to a client, right? We made this thing here. What did you think? And so you get all of it at once. You get the credentials, you get the connection, you get how it works. You can see it being used. You can see it in their bathroom being, I mean, it's like I feel like it hits all of it for me with the social commerce. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, really important to keep an eye on that, because even if it doesn't feel like it's the main form of how business is being transacted, if that's where things are happening with a Gen Z and I think even millennials, I can guarantee you that it's only going to grow. It's only going to become more the method. And so paying attention to that, even if your target audience isn't yet Gen Z or even isn't millennials, recognizing and watching where they're going, knowing that in 5 years they might be, and that you need to make sure your business is ready for that. I think that's critical.
I think
Yeah.
you bring up a really great point. I just got the chills because that was so like poignant, so like what would you say? Yeah, it's evolution. So what would you say to like, okay, I'm a estate planning attorney, or I am a divorce family, or I'm a corporate attorney, or I'm, like a professional services CPA. I mean, those are like traditional service providers, do you think they still have to do that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think many of those people probably see their main clientele as Gen X and maybe millennials. But I think that if they are really wanting to run a successful business, they're going to have to figure out how to, especially the folks who are consumer based, right? You're talking about estate planning or financial service folks. I think of PI, like different lawyers who
Yeah.
have direct to consumer. You build that connection because you're not hiring a company, you're not being hired by a company, you're being hired by individuals. And so what the individual thinks of you matters a whole heck of a lot. And so how you promote yourself in these spaces, and paying attention to where people are actually doing their business, where they're doing commerce, where am I going as a millennial to find my estate planning attorney? You want to be able to show up in that space. So for me, I'm still going through referrals and then vetting that referral through their website. That's likely how I'm going to do any of that work. So yes, you're building connections, you're networking, but also does your landing page look like a place that's going to have me pick up the phone? Or does it look like a place that's going to go, wow, this seems very dry and intense, and I don't know if I actually, this other person's got a sexier website, and maybe I'll just call them. I mean, I think understanding that stuff is really important.
Yeah, it's exciting. I know that like, well, I'm probably not a good example, but if the website says, copyright 2008, it's unsecure, the form is broken, I'm making decisions about the way that they show up, whether or
Totally.
not they're a good lawyer or not.
Absolutely.
We're just talking about lawyers a lot because most 80% of my business comes from lawyers. What about yours, Nathaniel?
Yeah, great question. So, for what we're talking about, a lot of my business does come from lawyers, financial services,
Yeah.
basically big corporate firms. I also have a wing of my business that's advertising, and it's structured a little differently, and it's kind of focused a little differently. I think about that work a little bit differently because generally the clients come to me with a pre-made campaign and they're ready to shoot, and I don't have to do a lot of the work of helping them say, who's your target audience and how do we make that look right? They've already done a lot of that. But more specifically, to your point, for the clients that are legal, for the clients that are financial services, for these clients that are doing, large real estate projects, they oftentimes don't have, a plan for this stuff. They're not really thinking it through.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's where we can really help and add value.
And they can go deep too. I mean, on how they want to structure their brand. And we could talk about their packages, their pricing model. I mean, there's so much there's so much than just more than creating the website, the way that you talk about yourself, the way that we have some law firms, they say, I want to have my lawyers be personalized. I want to share where they like to go to eat. I want to share, if they have a family, and then another law firm's like, don't put one personal piece of information on there. Keep it all like we got $1 million and whatever.
Yep. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I
So
also think about the idea of, you know, do you, how do you make it so that people, when they come to your website, they're excited to hire you, not
mhm.
reticent, right? There's like sometimes there's whether you're talking about price or you're talking about all these different elements, I think people are willing to spend the money if they see the value. So can you show them the value, not just in here's what I'm going to do for you when we sit down and have a conversation, but can you be leading into that through the website, through these marketing techniques so that people go, wow, this person does that too? That's really cool. Like you want them to get to the point where they're writing, they're getting an invoice and they're writing a check or nobody writes checks anymore, but they're spending the money and they're going, oh man, I'm really, really glad that I did this. It's worth every dollar. Like you can do that and you can get there through a good website, through good marketing techniques. You can actually have people in that headspace, I think. So again, that seems much more helpful and much more like longevity. Like there's a lot more longevity to people calling you back, people referring you out when you're creating that sort of experience. So yeah.
yeah, like have the conversation around designing, marketing, photography, websites, anything around your target client, not just like, we need a website.
Right.
Like it's a
Yeah.
waste of money.
Yes, exactly. And it will be a waste of money if you think of it in those terms because you're not actually, it's like you're doing 80% of the thing, but all the value comes in that last 20%. You get all the stuff and then you just let it sit there and it's stale and it's boring and nobody cares. And yeah, you spend a bunch of money on something that's basically useless. But if you really do the extra step, if you call people like us and you let us help you get the thing to a place where it's really humming along effectively, efficiently, then I think it can really do a number on your value and your business and what you're growing. So yeah.
And I also, to kind of follow up on that too, it's a cultural building piece.
Oh,
So if you're looking to hire lawyers, if you're looking to hire team members, they're going to do a deep dive on what's showing up for you as well, right?
yeah, I want to work for this company.
Yeah,
Mm.
one of our law firms we work with, they've got so much content. They go to the symphony, and then they document that all online, right? And so if I'm looking to be at work at a law firm, I can see they went to the Pumpkin Patch in Half Moon Bay. They went to the San Jose Symphony. You know, they have all kinds of fun things that they do, right?
It's great.
So we got to open our eyes or not, you know.
Or not. Yeah. You don't
So
have to do any of this, we're just trying to help.
yeah. Well, I think
Cool.
let's
This has been
wrap it
great.
up
Thank you.
in a minute here, but I think some of the key takeaways, again, you know, why we wanted to create this was, you know, to really just make people think about who you're talking to, you know, what are their values, and then talk to those, and they'll probably hear you more, right? And don't talk to everybody. People remember the way that you made them feel, not what you said a lot of times, right?
Especially as you move towards the younger generations, I think that vibe thing is really important. I think how they felt when they left is critical in whether or not they recall you, whether or not they want to, talk to you again. And I think that's the difference between, making the sale and not more
Yeah.
often.
And I, you know, when I was learning how to do sales, one of the things that got me over being scared of sales when I was just starting out was that I just really look at sales as helping people. If you hire me, I know
Totally.
you're going to be in good shape because we're the best at what we do, and I'm going to take care of you. So I look at it as helping people. And if you're a great lawyer, you doing these things is going to help people find you so you can save them from being ripped off or whatever. So it's all about that. So I would like to know if whoever is watching this, how they feel. Do they feel like these different generations and what we talked about is relevant? Do you have
Mhm.
opinions on that, or do you feel like it's all BS? I'm interested in everybody's opinion on stuff. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna put Nathaniel's link to his website in the chat or in the message box thingy on YouTube, and you can reach out to him for photography. He travels all over, not just Chicago, but different campaigns, even here in California.
I'll be there
Um,
in a week.
in a week. Okay, we
Yeah.
need to talk. We need to talk because I have some stuff to talk to you about. So with
Okay,
that
cool.
being said, I'm gonna hit stop on this. Any final notes or comments, Nathaniel?
No, yeah, feel free to check out my site. You can check out my Instagram as well. I can give that to you as well, Lainey.
What's
And
your
reach
website
out
and your handle?
same thing, yeah, nathanielfilbert.com. Nathaniel Filbert is the handle as well, so you can find me in either place. My name is spelled a little differently, so just make sure you get that A instead of the I in
Mhm.
place.
Thank your parents for that. Okay.
All
Well,
right, thank you. It's been
thanks,
great. Thanks,
Nathaniel.
Lainey.
Okay. See you
Talk
later.
soon.
All right. Bye.